Welcome back to Investigating Innovation with the I2C. Today, we've got Ben Mcgee from CyberProtex in the studio. We had an awesome conversation about recent cyber attacks and the rapidly growing need for companies to up their cybersecurity game. Let's roll. Hey, Ben, would you mind introducing yourself for our viewers?
Sure. I'm Ben Mcgee. I'm president and CEO of CyberProtex. I've had the company now for about 8 years, since 2012. I used to work at SAIC and decided to branch out on my own. And, after being invited to come over here to the I2C, took the leap of faith and came on over. So it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, really happy to have you here. What do you think of the I2C so far?
Man, I got to tell you, this facility is absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
It's decked out to the tilt, and man, it is top notch.
Yeah, I've been really happy to have had the opportunity to work here. At first, I was really unsure of what this building was going to be when I started here as a student, and in the end, like actually getting to come here and find work and be like, wow, this is pretty awesome. There's a lot of cool buildings on campus, but this is kind of in another league in a lot of ways. So why don't you kind of discuss, what you do, your areas of specialty, your professional interests?
Okay, absolutely. So I've been in the information security business for a little bit over 20 years now. In my heart, I'm a software engineer, and I grew up playing with Ataris and Intellivision, and really geeked out all throughout middle school and high school. And then, when I was at University of Florida, I really got into computers and computer science and developing websites, and kind of just stumbled into information security. And so over my career, I've been blessed by all the jobs that I've had and been surrounded by some great people. But with CyberProtex, we really do a lot of different things. And one of the main things that we do is try to not be on the bleeding edge, but the cutting edge of technology. Yep. So the software side, connecting systems, legacy systems to new systems, being able to do implementations and migrations for Microsoft, because we're a Microsoft Gold partner. But it really, the business was built on training and being a expert in cybersecurity, being able to go out and not only walk the walk, but talk the talk, and teach people in layman's terms ways to do advanced technical things really is a knack that I've had. So I built the company off of training and advanced cybersecurity training, certification training, and then we've made some good business off of being a Microsoft Gold partner and doing things like vulnerability assessments and penetration tests.
Yeah, and it's clear that what you're doing has a lot of value. In preparation for this podcast, I went on the CyberProtex website and just like looking through, all the different companies and agencies that you've worked with. It's a really seriously impressive list.
Well, thank you.
And then, like you said about training, like it's one thing to be good at something, but it's a completely different level to have the capability to not only know how to do it yourself, but it demonstrates a really high level of mastery to be able to also share that with others and, instill a mastery in them that they might not have had if they hadn't had the chance to work with, work in that kind of environment.
And that's kind of a sticking point for me. We've all had professors or teachers that have meant something to us in the past, and some of the mentors that I have had that really have taught me how to sharpen my craft and be able to not only teach but captivate audiences, whether it's a small audience or a big audience, and really being a student of the Disney franchise over my lifetime, and having kids and enjoying some of the animation having a friend that works at Pixar, I can
Wow.
tell you that, based off of my experience, being able to tell a story really holds people's attention.
Yeah.
And usually, whenever we go in and do any of the training that we have, that's what I really try to get all of our instructors to do, is share your experiences, try to give analogies to things that you've done in the past, or break it down in a way that is meaningful. And by doing that, I think they may not remember who we are as the instructor, but they'll remember that story. And that's one of the things that Disney does, and being a student of that and being able to captivate audience is something that we take great pride in.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting viewpoint on things. I mean, I think that's definitely true that stories are one of the best ways that you can engage people, because, stories aren't a particular thing to our culture. There's something fundamentally human about that. It's not just an American thing or a holdover from when our ancestors were living in Europe or, all over the world. It's something that you can look at any culture on this entire globe, and you're going to find people telling stories, and people who, are really interested in setting aside their time to hear those stories. And so I think that, building using that as kind of a foundation for how you're educating people is I think a really wise move.
Well, thank you.
So I'm curious, what is that kind of like for the students who come in for, training, for, what kind of things are you teaching them specifically?
Well, we get a lot of, especially here in the area, we get a lot of students that are from the DoD or a contractor of the DoD. And usually the training that we provide on a quarterly basis is around the 8570 cybersecurity compliance or Microsoft training. And usually those students see in the industry a need for certified cybersecurity professionals. So, there's a couple of different types of students that we have. We have the people that are forced to come, which usually we can lighten that up a little bit by easing the pain of having to have that certification through some of the different techniques that we use. Or there's another type of student that wants to better themselves and maybe take that next career step. There's different websites out there that talk about the supply and demand in the cybersecurity arena. And what we've seen is that there's nearly 1 million cybersecurity jobs in the United States. And almost half of those are not filled right now. So not only are universities cranking out people with CIS or MIS or advanced cybersecurity degrees, but a lot of the certifications on the industry standard is really where we make our mark. And having certified over 3,000 people in the past 8 years, that's something that we take great pride in.
Wow.
We've had the opportunity to do business with the Marine Corps out in Camp Pendleton, California, with the FEMA and DHS up in the New York area, and really being able to share the stories and talk about some of the things that we've done is really cool. That's something I really geek out on.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of like, I was talking about how CyberProtex has really worked with just this huge range of companies and organizations. And I was wondering if you think that how much credit do you lend to that being your presence here in Huntsville? Is that something that you think you could have easily achieved in other cities, or is the unique environment here something that's been, kind of highly conducive to your thriving business?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, when my wife and I moved up here 15 years ago, we were when I first heard about the Huntsville area, in my head I was thinking of a different type of Alabama.
Yeah.
And when I came up here to scope it out, and then subsequently moved the family up here, man, I got to tell you, this has been a blessing for me and my wife and our family to live here in the Huntsville area. And I think that when people that are in the know, or people that are in our business that think of high tech, there's Silicon Valley, and there's Huntsville, and how much more do you need to hear when big contracts are awarded? Here in town, we have the Missile Defense Agency, we have NASA with the Marshall Space Flight Center, and a lot of really big things are going on here in the Huntsville area. So, when we put out a proposal and somebody sees that we're from Huntsville, immediately it gives us the street cred. I think that puts it hopefully up above the rest of the people that are bidding on those projects.
Yeah, I often think about what people here in Huntsville, like what opportunities are available to them, but I don't as often think about how the fact that just being from Huntsville might really seriously affect the perception of your business from outside of the city. That's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. And, being part of something like the I2C really in a business incubation component, but also the fosters of creativity and innovation is something that is right up our alley for CyberProtex. And, moving over to this facility and being able to lean on all the resources that the I2C has is something that we're really excited about and look forward to.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great opportunity here for, all of the businesses that we have the chance to work with. I was going to transition into thinking about cybersecurity more just like less as an industry and more as like a practice. And so I know that security is really one of the biggest concerns for all companies right now, big and small. And, it's not been very long since the cyber attack on the Colonial Pipeline was in the news. And it's clear that, the field of cybersecurity is here to stay. And what do you kind of foresee for the future of cybersecurity? Do you think that smaller companies who have been prioritizing security from their very, inception are going to rise to the top? Or are the already massive corporations going to just be performing these like extensive security reforms that they need to do in order to maintain their current position and to meet the needs of market that's, I think, really growing in their awareness of, the level of security that different companies have?
Sure. It's almost every time that we go to sleep, we wake up the next morning, we see a big headline that says that somebody's been attacked or somebody's been compromised. And with the rise of ransomware, it is a significant issue. And we've had quite a few customers that were not our customers that came to us after they've been compromised. So I think to answer your question, in my opinion, it seems as though there still is a significant deficit in the number of highly technical people in our industry. And what do I mean by that? I mean the people that can actually solve that problem of cracking the nut to figure out what is the root cause analysis of an issue. If you look at any of the historical events that have happened in recent, the Kaseya hack that was the biggest last week that happened. That's a massive breach. Companies like mine that offer managed services usually would use a remote monitoring tool that allows you to remotely connect to companies and instead of having to go in person over to those people's sites, you use these tools to be able to sit here in the I2C, or and since COVID, maybe at home, to monitor and remotely support. And so Kaseya is a product that companies use that does the managed security side of the house. And when the attackers went after that massive conglomerate of a cybersecurity company that does remote management, and they were able to compromise, now not only do they have the mothership, but all the people underneath it that are consumers of that, and to the tone of $70 million. And that ransomware is the biggest that we've seen so far. So whether it's the Kaseya hack or the Colonial Pipeline, what we've seen is that there's people that know that they've been compromised, or people that usually will kind of brush it off. Whether or not it's going to be the small businesses or the large businesses that rise to the occasion, usually what we've seen in the marketplace is that the big businesses are kind of like cruise ships, and it's difficult for them to make a quick turn to adapt and recover. So the small businesses usually are the ones that are the triage. They'll come in and do the incident response. They'll help the big businesses to mitigate or remediate any issues that they could possibly have. So I think to answer that question that you had, small businesses continue to get acquired by big businesses because of that reason, because they're more shapeshifters and able to be dynamic and resilient, and hopefully offer something that the big business currently doesn't have. So that's what we see in the marketplace. Microsoft, Facebook, Amazon, Apple continually to acquire small businesses who have a discriminating technology. And because of that, I think that the small businesses will continue to be the ones that pave the way for the large businesses.
Wow, that's fascinating. Do you think that those smaller businesses are going to be able to, or will maintain that security if they grow, or is it something that they're ultimately going to have to compromise on in order to grow?
That's a great question. I think that a lot of times as a business grows, certain things or concessions are made in order to satisfy the quickness of the growth of the company. But if you're providing security as a service, obviously as a core or fundamental value for your company, I don't think that that's something that as a small business like mine, for instance, that comes in and provides triage or incident response, we have to be vigilant. We have to be people that are reading those stories, trying to reach out to the local authorities and figure out a little bit of additional information that may not be available in mainstream media, just to see techniques or ways that the attackers may have been creatively or cleverly able to get onto systems. And I think that the naive approach from somebody who's just getting into the field is, especially the younger generation, is they want it now. They want it. They want it to work right now. They want to be able to push a button and be able to hit that quick fix button. That is easy button. And with cybersecurity, that's not the way that it is. And really, if we talk about that, it's it gets into networking communications. It gets into access control. How is it authenticated? What are we going to do to protect it with operations security? How is the software developed? Is it buried deep in the bowels of the software so nobody can find it? And there's a lot of different ways that the attacks are manifested. But typically, what I've seen and what our partners with DHS and FEMA and the military see is that typically there's some sort of misconfiguration that was done on the system that allows the attacker to see a gaping hole or vulnerability that allows them to get right in lickety split.
Yeah. So really, you're practically doing detective work to figure all of this out and figure out ways to get ahead of things.
Absolutely. That's a great way to look at it. It's almost, there's a couple of products that people use in our business. One's called the Sleuth Kit. Another's called Autopsy. So, using that metaphor as a detective, that would be a great way to look at it.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And then I was going to ask, what are a couple of ways that entrepreneurs are able to ensure that they're prioritizing security, even when cybersecurity is not necessarily their field of expertise?
So typically what we see is you can either figure it out up front or run around with your head cut off once something happens. And you can either invest in it now or take your chances and potentially get compromised. And one thing that we typically will say to our customers is, how much is trust worth? If somebody said that information is the oil of the digital age, and if you think about the historical events, really, it's like gold, and really, if you're trusted with customers' data, and you're offering up information or you're keeping information for customers, what is that worth to you? And if you think about all the big companies that are out there, when's the last time that we heard about Amazon getting compromised, or Apple getting compromised, or Microsoft getting compromised, or Facebook getting compromised? They have teams that are spending 24/7, 365 that are red teams that are going in there trying to see if they can get onto those systems, and paying companies like ours to go and do that. And so I think that, from my perspective, what we usually will see is that small businesses don't necessarily value security as much as larger businesses until they are compromised. And then post facto, they'll come in and say, okay, we can't let this happen again. Yeah. And sometimes that could be at the detriment of the company. One thing that we've seen, there was a company not too long ago that had over 100 customers, and they were compromised. And based off of that compromise, they lost a significant amount of their customer base because customers lose trust in you providing that service to them, or maybe protecting the information that you've been trusted to protect. And we see that time and time again. And so you can either try to pay it up front and get it secured, or pay it in the rears and maybe lose customers post facto.
Yeah. Really, the PR ramifications are, I think, one of the biggest considerations that companies have to have, because it's like I do a series here with some of our partners that's Founder Fundamentals, and we've been working on a Marketing 101 series. And this last episode that I was working on was about, had a lot about public relations and like the differences between marketing and public relations. And one thing they brought up was, the BP oil spill and how, detrimental that was for their PR. And really, years ago, that's what we were seeing, was a lot of, here's this physical thing that this company did that, is like, here's a reason that we shouldn't trust them as much, maybe. And now, for years, it's been, here's this very much digital kind of, figurative oil spill that's happened. And that's what's really degrading the trust. And I feel like it's a lot rarer to really find examples where it is something physical that's happening that is, causing damage to a company's image. It seems like almost exclusively these days something about there being a security breach, some sort of data being lost. So I think that definitely that comparison of data to being like the oil of the information age is really apt, just because, you know, it does have that same kind of value. And, when it's not handled properly, there are huge ramifications both for the business and for, I would argue just the consumer base as a whole.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You mentioned this, and in just kind of thinking about it a little bit more, here in Huntsville, we do a lot of business with the DoD and the Defense Industrial Base, and quite frankly, the Department of Defense is absolutely sick of it. They're sick of small businesses, they're sick of medium-sized businesses, they're sick of large businesses getting compromised, and so about 4 years ago, the federal government started to put controls in place to keep the honest person honest, and really in the contracts start to require the any business who won a contract proof that they were at least having a baseline level of security or information security protecting the government assets. And I think that if you look at the history of it, and especially with some of our adversaries, one of the reasons why the federal government has been sick of it, and they want to show that, or they want contracting companies to show that they have the cybersecurity in place, is because America has been spending tons and tons of money in R&D, and then 3 or 4 years later, we see our adversaries having the same technology that we do, and they didn't spend any money on R&D. And how did they do that? Well, there's a bunch of different ways that they could, but seeing that and just a historical track record of that, the DoD has put in the DFARS controls, which is 110 controls that defense industrial-based companies need to have, that really shows a manifestation of security that's been put in place, not only from the physical side of the house, putting in physical controls to gates, guards, and guns, but access controls on the logical side. How are we communicating? How are we securing the network communications? How are we auditing information? What are we doing to keep our people continuously trained? Are we doing phishing attacks? Are we doing quarterly cybersecurity awareness training? And from that, the DFARS controls, now we are seeing more into the CMMC, which is the latest and greatest innovation of those types of controls. So those are a couple of topics that I'd love to have another podcast with you and follow up and talk a little bit more about. But those are the types of things that the federal government is putting in place to make sure, to force, if you will, the contract companies to practice security instead of just saying, yes, we're doing security,
Yeah. So how important would you say it is that the owners of these small businesses educate themselves on cybersecurity versus simply hiring other experts in the field to kind of solve their problems for them?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a bunch of different resources that are available online. The Department of Homeland Security has the National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education, which is a great acronym. It's called NICE.
It's a nice acronym.
It's a great, but that's an easy way to remember. And you could go out there and look at some of those artifacts or resources that they provide from a small business's perspective. Of course, YouTube is a great way to go out and train. Our YouTube channel, we have over 500 videos on. So if there's any topic that is specific that somebody wants to know, they could go out there and take a look at that. But yeah, absolutely educating, even at a baseline level, at a just to become a little bit more savvy so you can understand the vernacular.
Yeah.
In my opinion, I think that would do the small business owner good justice moving forward. It's really important for not only small businesses, but just business leaders in general to understand the basics of cybersecurity. Like we were saying before, if you're being trusted to protect information from your customers and you're compromised, one way that we always look at it is how much is that worth to you? Once you get that egg in your face, once you get that that you lose that trust, your customers have a shadow of a doubt. How difficult is that to get back? And oftentimes it's very difficult, very difficult. So, I would say that it's important for small businesses to even flower shop owners or grocery store small businesses or people that aren't in high tech fields, go out there, become a little bit more educated in what you can do to try to protect yourself. One thing that I would recommend is make sure you have backups on things, and make sure you test them regularly. Mm-hmm. If you're like a lot of small businesses, and this is where we come into play. If you're like a lot of small businesses, you don't even want to deal with it, and you could call somebody like us at CyberProtex, and we could come and either take over or manage your security, manage your IT for you, or there's other companies out there that do the same thing. Mm-hmm. And we find that even the small to medium-sized businesses, they want to just transfer that risk to a professional organization that allows them to do what they do, and then not have to worry about all the IT stuff. And having that managed services and being able to protect companies through using information security tools, I think is another avenue that small businesses can take. So either educate yourself and then try to do it yourself, or outsource it to someone.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's great that there are companies like CyberProtex that exist for, giving companies that opportunity to just kind of focus on what they do. But from what I understand, it seems like it is still just important for people to develop that, like you said, develop the vocabulary, just because I think it makes it so much easier for people to work across fields when they spend at least a little bit of time getting to know, here's what this person's talking about. If you're going to be working with engineers, it's good to have some understanding of engineering terminology. And so, even if you are an entrepreneur and you are going to hire a company like CyberProtex to handle all of your cybersecurity, then, it also is super helpful, I'm sure, to spend that time and, invest those hours into learning, here's why this is important. And then they have a better idea of what you're actually doing for them. I'm sure that, that gives businesses a much greater sense of the value that they're getting from, the services that you provide. And on that note, I think I'm going to thank you for coming on the podcast. I've had a great conversation with you. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you here in the studio. And I hope you've enjoyed it.
Well, thank you for having me. I think this is a great studio. It looks great. It sounds great. I'd love to come back and do it again sometime.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you again for having me.
Thanks so much for joining me in the studio today, Ben. It was a blast getting to learn from someone who's found so much success in the cybersecurity industry here in Huntsville. In the coming years, I think we'll see companies make huge improvements in the area of data security, a task I know CyberProtex is helping achieve every day. I hope that you'll all join me back here in the studio for the next episode of the Company Spotlight. In the meantime, check out our socials, at UAHI2C on Instagram and Twitter, and UAH Invention to Innovation Center on Facebook. Onward and upward.